What if the man who coached your kid's little league team, the guy who waved at you every single morning from his driveway, the neighbor everyone called the nicest guy on the block, what if that same man had been hiding something so dark, so deeply buried, that even his own wife had no idea? And what if the cops had been looking for him for over 20 years? Stay right there, because this story is going to mess with your head in ways you are not ready for. If this kind of story is your thing, and trust me, it gets so much darker from here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. We drop new stories every week, and you do not want to miss what is coming next. His name was David Carver, and on the surface, he was the definition of the American dream. 43 years old, lived in a quiet suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. He had a beautiful wife named Sandra, 2 teenage daughters who adored him, a steady job as an accountant at a mid-sized firm downtown, and a reputation in his neighborhood that most people spend their entire lives trying to build. His neighbors described him as the kind of man who would shovel your driveway before you even woke up in winter. His coworkers said he always remembered birthdays, always brought donuts on Fridays, always stayed late to help someone finish a project. His daughter's friends called him the cool dad. His wife called him her best friend. Nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, had even the faintest suspicion that behind those warm eyes and that easy smile, David Carver was carrying a secret so heavy it would have crushed most people to the ground decades ago. But 20 years before David was coaching Little League and bringing donuts to the office, he was someone else entirely. In the spring of 2006, in a small town called Millhaven, roughly 300 miles from where David now lived his picture-perfect life, a 22-year-old woman named Claire Hutchins went missing. Claire was a college student, bright and ambitious, studying nursing, the kind of person her professors said was going to genuinely change lives one day. She vanished on a Tuesday night after leaving the library on campus. Her car was found 2 days later in a parking lot 4 miles away. Her backpack, her phone, her wallet, all still inside the car. Claire herself was nowhere. The investigation that followed was massive. The whole town showed up to search. Flyers went up across 3 counties. Her parents went on local television begging for information. Detectives worked around the clock. And despite all of it, despite every resource they threw at the case, Claire Hutchins was never found. The case went cold. The file sat in a cabinet. And life, as it cruelly does, moved on. What nobody in Millhaven knew, what nobody anywhere knew, was that a 23-year-old man named David Carver had been the last person to see Claire alive. And he had spent every single day of the 20 years that followed making absolutely sure it stayed that way. He had moved cities within 6 months of Claire's disappearance, changed jobs, slowly, deliberately rebuilt himself into someone completely new. He met Sandra at a work conference 2 years later, fell in love, or did whatever version of love a man like David was capable of. And by the time they got married and had their first daughter, David Carver from Millhaven barely existed anymore. Just a ghost of a past that he had convinced himself was buried too deep for anyone to ever dig up. But here is the thing about secrets. They have a way of surviving things that should have killed them. It started with a routine traffic stop. That is it. That is all it took to unravel 20 years of carefully constructed lies. In March of 2026, a patrol officer in Columbus pulled David over for a broken tail light. Ran his license, ran his plates, everything came back clean, because David had been clean for 20 years, at least on paper. The officer let him go with a warning, but something nagged at him later that night. He could not explain it, not logically anyway. Just a feeling. He ran David's name again, this time more thoroughly, cross-referencing through a newer federal database that had only come online the previous year, a system that linked old cold case files from smaller jurisdictions to current national records. And there it was, a flag. A tiny digital thread connecting David Carver of Columbus, Ohio to a David Carver who had lived in Millhaven, who had been interviewed once, briefly, as a peripheral witness in the disappearance of Claire Hutchins, and who had then seemingly ceased to exist. The detective assigned to follow up almost dismissed it. 20-year-old cold cases with a single tangential witness connection are not exactly high priority. But she pulled the original file anyway, and what she found made her sit up straight at her desk at 2 in the morning and reach for her phone. Because buried in the original witness interview notes from 2006, notes that had never been digitized, never been flagged, just sitting in a physical folder in a cabinet in a station in a town that barely had the resources to keep its parking meters working, was a detail that the original investigators had noted but never fully pursued. David Carver, when interviewed, had mentioned seeing Claire walking toward the library, but Claire's roommate had told detectives that Claire had already left the library and was heading home. David's story put him in a place at a time that should have raised immediate alarm. But the original detective had retired 6 months into the investigation. The case had been handed off twice, and in the chaos of a cold case slowly going cold, that single inconsistency had gotten lost. Now it was found, and everything that followed moved fast. Within 72 hours, detectives had quietly pulled David's financial records, his phone records from 2006 that had been archived but never analyzed, and had begun surveillance. What they found in the financial records stopped everyone cold. 3 weeks before Claire disappeared, David had made a series of cash withdrawals totaling just over $4,000. In the weeks after her disappearance, those withdrawals stopped completely. And then, buried in a storage unit registered under a name that was one letter off from David's mother's maiden name, detectives found something that made even the most experienced officers in that room go quiet. They found a box. Inside the box were items belonging to Claire Hutchins. Her student ID, a bracelet her mother had described. In every single interview she had given over 20 years. And photographs that made it impossible to believe that David Carver was anything other than exactly what the evidence was now screaming that he was. When detectives knocked on David's door on a Thursday morning in April, Sandra answered. She was in her robe, holding a cup of coffee, and the look on her face when she saw the badges and the number of officers standing on her porch was something the lead detective later said she would never forget. David was in the kitchen making eggs. He did not run, he did not yell. He did not do any of the things you might expect from a man whose entire constructed world was collapsing in real time. He just turned off the stove, set down the spatula, and looked at his wife with an expression that she later described as almost relieved, like a man who had been holding his breath for 20 years and had finally exhaled. His daughters were upstairs getting ready for school. They heard everything. Sandra Carver filed for divorce from the county jail visiting room 6 days after David's arrest. She has not spoken publicly since. David's daughters have changed their last names. The town of Millhaven held a memorial for Claire Hutchins the week after David's arrest, 20 years late, but finally with answers. Claire's mother, who had never stopped believing that someone knew something, who had kept Claire's bedroom exactly as it was the last morning her daughter left for the library, sat in the front row of that memorial and did not say a single word. She did not need to. David Carver is currently awaiting trial and faces charges that carry a potential life sentence. His attorney has entered a not guilty plea. The trial is expected to begin later this year. And here is what keeps me up at night about this story. David Carver was not a monster who looked like a monster. He was a monster who looked like your neighbor, your coworker, your kids' coach. He survived 20 years not because he was smarter than everyone else, but because he was patient and because the systems designed to catch people like him had gaps. The detective who caught him did so almost by accident on a hunch at 2 in the morning because of a database that did not exist a year earlier. Claire Hutchins deserved better than that. And the fact that it took 20 years and a lucky break to get her even a fraction of justice is something that should make all of us deeply uncomfortable. If this story hit you the way it hit me, drop a comment below, tell me what part shocked you the most. And share this with someone who loves true crime, because stories like Claire's deserve to be heard. Subscribe to Wild Tales Animation for new cases every week, and I will see you in the next one.